They said when you got here, the whole thing started. I think you're the cause of all this. I think you're evil! Evil!
Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Nope, that's definitely a bird. And it's part 2 of our Alfred Hitchcock extravaganza. It's a mouthful. If you haven't already listened to part 1, highly recommend doing that. It's one of my favourite episodes, and we covered some great films like Vertigo, Dial M for Murder, Rebecca, The Man Who Knew Too Much, etc. And we're back again for part 2. We're going to be covering
Rear Window,
The 39 Steps,
Suspicion,
Notorious,
Strangers on a Train,
and The Birds. And it's the 85th anniversary of the 39 Steps this year.
Just the same as last week. You put that group of films together and you just go, wow, that's like a hell of a list of films there.
And again, we've picked some from like the legendary tier and some from the slightly lesser known or less culturally memorized films as well. So we've got a nice little mix. So last episode, we started with a career overview, a bit of a bio of Alfred Hitchcock's life and his work. And we said that in this episode, we wanted to look a bit more into the dark side of him and the dark side of his genius, because for the people who knew him, I think it's a very different story. Whether or not it's all true or not.
Yeah.
In particular, the actors that worked with him have a lot to say about his approach.
There is an idea about the kind of person he was, isn't there? He had an extremely contentious relationship with actors, by the sounds of it. He's very, very well known for saying that actors were just cattle. And we were discussing this. We think that on the whole, he's probably said this to be divisive, and it's never been forgotten. But we think it's more the fact that you look at a field of cows and they're all the same. That is how Hitchcock saw his actors. They were just parts of the puzzle that he was putting together. And it didn't matter if you were James Stewart or Cary Grant or Grace Kelly. He had a job for you. You go in, you do it, and that's it.
It got bums on seats more than anything, didn't it? Having big name stars.
Yeah.
But because he'd already planned his films out well in advance, the shooting stage for him was pretty boring, and he didn't really have any interest in celebrity, really. So there was a bit of a contrast with what audiences wanted and what he wanted to achieve. He didn't really care if they wanted to improvise or if something wasn't comfortable for them. He said to them, I don't care how it feels, I know how it's going to look.
Yeah. And despite the fact that he's known for having this difficult relationship with actors, they went back and worked with him multiple times.
They did.
Cary Grant, he worked with multiple times, James Stewart, Grace Kelly, Ingrid Bergman. So he can't have been that bad. And I think as well, adding into his relationship with actors is the kind of persona he's got, and this idea that he is quite controversial, the themes he covers, I mean, voyeurism and the representation of women. I mean, there's a list, isn't there? There's obsession and desire and sex and all sorts of things in there that weren't really popular at the time.
No, not at all.
At all. But what it did for his kind of persona, it does make him quite controversial. He's got a reputation, yet people go and work with him.
It makes you think, actually, where's the line between what he's just considering story or plot or even theme, and what elements of himself that he's projecting onto the screen? Like you just said, with the types of films he was making, you could tell he had a very different interest in what was entertaining.
Yeah.
These very disturbing things, he couldn't really see the distinction between what was inappropriate and what was poetic and what was artistic.
I think that probably one of his biggest fears that everybody knows about is the fact that he was scared of policemen, and we mentioned this last week. Most of his films have an element of crime. Most films have police in some form or another. And I think that's very much him as a person. So it's hard to say, really, what else in there was him.
Yeah, but I guess another thing that has become a sort of urban legend is he used to do a lot of cruel, sadistic, practical jokes on people, apparently. On the one hand, that could be seen as sort of playful, harmless.
But not his ones.
But then again, there's that line. Of course, we're going to be discussing The Birds today and the actress Tippi Hedren, who was a non-actress who basically he took under his wing and mentored and moulded.
A muse.
Yeah, exactly, into his perfect Hitchcock girl. He kind of owned her, and again, inappropriate jokes, things going a bit too far to the point where you could almost definitely read it as sexual harassment or a sexual advance.
Well, she's had an awful lot to say about him, hasn't she, over the years?
Yeah.
None of it good, really. Mostly negative.
Yeah. It gave a rather disturbing new meaning to when he said blondes make the best victims. Obviously, when he originally said that, he was referring to the character types that he would put in his films, but it does get a little bit close to the knuckle. And I watched the BBC film The Girl, which was about Tippi Hedren and the making of the birds. Oof, if that is true, I mean, it's probably been exaggerated, and I think it's a very one-sided perspective of what happened, but God, it's creepy. By that point in the 60s, he was drinking quite heavily, he was impotent, he was obviously very sexually frustrated. Him and Alma Reville weren't getting on necessarily too well, and she was not complicit in the whole thing, but she tolerated it all happening. It's very, very dark. So, yeah, absolutely. There's a very big distinction between what we see as Alfred Hitchcock, the legend, the filmmaker, the master of suspense, and the man and the individual that people knew.
So should we jump straight in then and see if we can find any of these themes? I know we will.
Absolutely.
in these movies. So I'm going to start with Rear Window. First thing I'm going to say, slow start, but boy does the tension ramp up as the plot unfolds. My God. By the end, I was like riveted. I was like, oh. I'm really excited.
You've got to know the calm before you get the storm, don't you?
Exactly. It was very good. So key thing in this film, absolute key, is the location. We're shown the entire courtyard at the back of this apartment complex, basically. And I'll tell you a little bit about the premise so that you understand where we're going. So you've got this gentleman, played by James Stewart, called Jeff, and he's a photographer, and he's broken his leg, so he's in a full leg cast, stuck in this apartment, can't move, can't do anything for himself, really. And what he's doing to get the time passed is watch people out of his window, basically.
Yeah, best thing to do.
Yeah, so it's again voyeurism. It comes into it again because he's just watching people. They don't know he's watching, and he is convinced that the neighbour across the way has murdered his wife, and then the story unfolds from there. So we can see everything from Jeff's window. The scene of the crime, the entry, exit, part of the street. Enough for Jeff to put two and two together when he's seeing the events occur. And honestly, it's such a unique setting. It's compact, it's claustrophobic. And within this courtyard, we see people's lives played out and the crimes witnessed and solved, all without leaving this room.
It's so good.
It's so good. The other part of this is voyeurism, which I've mentioned. It is the theme, basically, of the film. Jeff's trapped in his apartment. All he can do is watch the world go by, and he becomes very keen on that pastime. He's told multiple times that it's not right.
An unhealthy hobby, I suppose.
But you learn in little things. What's really interesting about this is you haven't just got the film about the murder. You've got all of these characters have kind of little arcs. You know, you learn things about the neighbours. So each has their own little storyline. So you've got the songwriter who's struggling to write his song. You've got Miss Lonely Hearts, who's obviously, trying to find someone. So you've got all that. And obviously the ethics of looking in on people's private lives. Should he be watching? There's certain things a stranger shouldn't witness. Miss Lonely Hearts, she gets assaulted at one point. And even he at that point questions himself, I don't think I should be watching these things. So I would say ethics is another defining point from the film. Yeah. What Jeff is doing essentially is spying on people, which we would say in normal society is wrong. And it's questioned. He has a nurse and she questions him, and he's dating Grace Kelly, of course, and she questions it. But in doing what he's doing, he's uncovered a worse crime than spying, a murder. And it becomes almost a moral duty to discover the truth and have the character who's done the crime arrested for it,
Once the idea is there, it just grows and grows and grows, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You can't just sit back.
No.
I think that's what's relatable to people. You would do the same. You wouldn't just sit there and go, oh, he's probably murdered his wife.
Yeah.
You would do something about it. And my last key theme, I think, which is less obvious, it's more kind of in the background, is loneliness. So, though in reality, they're all in a small, compact area, everyone's on top of each other, they've only got the little compartment, but they're not interacting with each other. Jeff and the audience are kept at arm's length from everyone.
Yeah.
So, how much you really tell about people, you don't know a lot. You just see in these few things. The main example I'd say would be Mrs. Lonely Hearts. Obviously, she is a very lonely character. But another would be the songwriter. He's alone working on his composition. They eventually connect in the last scene through his music.
Yeah.
And then you've got the dancer. She's got this stream of bows, but no real connection until her love comes back from the army at the end.
Yeah.
And you could say the same for Jeff himself. It's clear through his job. He's a photographer, he goes all over the world. And he argues with Lisa, his girlfriend played by Grace Kelly, that he considers himself a lone wolf. He obviously has commitment issues. He won't marry her because he's convinced that she couldn't live with him doing his current profession and he won't give it up.
Yeah.
And he says one of them would have to change and neither of them really want to. Yet when she says she'll leave him, he just wants to carry on as they are. Because he knows he'd be too lonely without her, but he can't commit.
Yeah.
He cannot commit to her. She also would be lonely, and she makes this big thing about saying, "Well, I'll leave." And he asks, "When will I see you again?" And she says, "Not for a long time, or maybe until tomorrow night," because she knows really that she couldn't keep her resolve. She would want to see him.
Yeah.
And in the end, you see Lisa, the last scene, casual clothes, signifying she's given up this high life and she's settled down with Jeff. But he's asleep and she picks up a fashion magazine. I do have an issue with that. Once again, the woman has had to change to settle because, God forbid, it was the man that did it. But that's a whole other conversation, so I won't get into that. But yeah, I think as a whole, you could describe the plot very, very simply, but it's just so entertainingly done.
Yeah, it's the other little bits that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Like the fact that there are these little other micro stories. And the thing that I always remember, because you tend to cover this in film studies at school or wherever you are, films are great sort of metaphor for what cinema is as well. The reason we go to watch other people's stories is because we're nosy.
And who doesn't people watch when they're out?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
I definitely do.
Yeah.
We want stories and we want to make up stories using what we can see and what we've heard and things like that. And I like that about what you said with morality, because especially in his case, it's all there. Like his window is the screen, and if it's there for you to see, why wouldn't you look?
Yeah, well, like you say, he's looking out. Is it immoral for him? And if it's a screen, is it immoral for us?
Exactly.
As the audience,
yeah.
It's very clever.
Oh,
I know. Yeah, you just put that on. Ooh.
We're all peeping toms, aren't we,
Very
today?
clever. Right. Okay. Let's go straight on with your first movie.
It's the earliest film we're covering.
Yeah.
This is the 39 Steps. It's from 1935. Hadn't seen this before, but I'd wanted to for a long time. Basic story. There's a man called Richard Hannay. He's played by Robert Donat, which always makes me laugh because it sounds like donut. He invites a mysterious woman to his apartment one night, discovers that she's a spy, and she's uncovered a plot to steal some vital British military secrets. But she's being tracked down by assassins and she's killed during the night. So inevitably, Hannay is wanted for her murder. So not only must he flee, but he has to use the fragments of information that he managed to get from her the night before. Something about a man in Scotland and something called 39 Steps. And basically, he takes on the responsibility to stop the plot. First thing that really struck me about this film, it's in no way confined by the limitations of early cinema at all.
Yeah.
It's very much an action film. Like, really, really is. And I think, if anything, all contemporary escapist entertainment started with films like this, and that's in the pacing of it. So it's continually moving forwards. It never stops, and in a good way. It keeps going and going and going. He's on the run. He's being chased. He's pursuing the answers. They're pursuing him. It's very action-packed.
There's a reason that Hitchcock became what he was, because like you say, he wasn't confined by what other filmmakers were in the time. He pushed the boundaries.
No idea was too small or too big, I suppose.
Yeah.
which is also demonstrated in the use of space. It's not just in one house like a lot of the films that we're looking at are. This is multiple locations, landscapes, countries, even if you think about it, because there's his house and the music halls and the theatres of London, but then you've got the train, the Flying Scotsman. Then he's in cars, on farms, on bridges, in rivers, all across the Scottish Highlands and the moors where he's being pursued. So that's fantastic too. And then the plethora of secondary characters. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's all the people he meets along the way. Farmers, lingerie salesmen on the train, a milkman whose outfit he borrows, policemen, enemy spies, all sorts of things. It's a very old school British spy film, and this can go two ways really, and this is my second point, because you can look at it as a conspiracy film where spies are everywhere and you're being watched and you're being followed and you can't trust everybody, and there is a genuine mystery. What is the 39 steps? What is the plot? But also, I found the film to be a comedy, if I'm being honest, because ultimately it's an accidental spy film. It's not much different from what happened to the McKennas in The Man Who Knew Too Much.
Yeah.
Or Johnny English, for example. It's almost the same thing.
Yeah.
For example, at one point, he finds himself being mistaken for the guest speaker of honour at this sort of political gathering in an assembly hall in Scotland. And he somehow manages to just improvise his entire way through, win the crowd over with this speech. He looks down at one point at a poster that's on the table in front of him. It's upside down though. And I think they're voting for an MP, a new MP or something like that. And the man's name is Mr. McCorkadale, and he says, "Your candidate, Mr. McCrocodile." So that's hilarious. There's a whole sequence where him and Pamela, who doesn't come until a lot later on, they're handcuffed together for a very long period of time, and they have to basically pretend that they're a runaway couple and conceal the fact that they are literally joined at the hip. Gestures don't work, and they can't sign the visitors register at the hotel they try and stay at. And just in general, I think Robert Donat does a fantastic job. He's just such a cool, relaxed, charming, level-headed, quick-thinking guy, and it gets to the point where he just rolls his eyes every time something else goes wrong. One of my favourite lines, again, a comedy line. He's just been captured again, basically, by policemen who are actually enemy spies in disguise, and they get stopped on the road because of a big herd of sheep, and he goes, "Hello, what are we stopping for now?" "Oh, it's a whole flock of detectives." Brilliant. And then the last thing is more of just an observation really about the style. I say style, this is the thing, it's artistic flair, but it's always servicing the story, and it's what we might call narrative economy. So it's telling us the information in as efficient way as possible. Like things are superimposed onto the screen. His memory of what the clues were are superimposed through the woman's face as he looks at the map, for example. Or you get a load of mixed media, like a radio broadcast will tell us the information about, oh yes, this man's been suspected of this and we think he's escaped to the Highlands. Newspapers, we did the same in Dial M for Murder. Why have a full conversation in a scene about the exposition of this, that, and the other when you can just show a newspaper? Things like that.
Yeah.
And one very clever element, he's shot at one moment, and you think, oh, and it just cuts to black. And rather than showing you the entire sequence of what happened afterwards, it just cuts away to some characters you met earlier, and he borrowed a coat from them, and they just said, "Oh, have you seen my hymn book? It was in the pocket of my jacket." And you realise, so you're left to join the dots. And it's much quicker. So yeah, for an early film, very impressive. I loved it.
Oh, good.
I really thought it was like I was laughing out loud as well.
Yeah.
Like it didn't feel like an old film.
You don't necessarily get on very well with older films.
It depends.
So it's nice to hear that you had such a good relationship with it.
I think because it's so British as well.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong sometimes.
I think there's something nice actually about being British and going back and watching something that's so quintessentially British.
Yeah. And the nature of the story as well. It's all the things we know today, but just the original.
All stemmed from here.
Yeah, and that's why everything else has been so good since of the same genre.
Oh, well, we're jumping on, not to another spy thing. I don't think there's any spies in this one. So this is Suspicion, that came out in 1941, and it stars Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine. Now, I'm going to start by saying it doesn't feel anything like a Hitchcock film at the beginning. It's got a completely different tone. The first half, especially, is almost whimsical. And the acting, the script, the score all indicate that. It was supposed to be a study of a murder as seen through the eyes of the eventual victim. However, because Cary Grant was to be the killer and Joan Fontaine the person killed, the studio forced Hitchcock to alter the ending.
Right.
They were concerned with Cary Grant's heroic image and insisted that it be changed.
Taken out of his control.
Yeah. The first thing I want to concentrate on here is lies. It's not always lies, but Johnny, played by Cary Grant, he meets Joan Fontaine's character and he is extremely charming. And Lena, played by Joan Fontaine, kind of this serious, quite rich woman. Her parents are quite rich, and she kind of falls head over heels for him in that real early movie way that it was just like, oh, well, I don't think much of you, and oh my god, no, I'm totally in love with you in about 2 minutes.
You.
Yeah. So, like I say, it's not always lies, but he has a tendency of withholding information, like going to the races when he'd promised to quit betting, making up a story about selling these chairs that her father had given them as a wedding present when he actually sold them to pay his debts and bet. Doesn't let on that he's been fired from his job for 6 weeks for embezzling money. And because of his lies, she doesn't then know what to believe. This leads me on to the second thing, suspicion. Yeah. Just like the title.
The name of the game.
The word doubt, something she feels strongly on and off about, is used in a game of Scrabble, as well as the word murder. And she begins to have these awful suspicions about Johnny and what he's going to do to his friend.
Yeah.
Every time her suspicions are proven wrong, she becomes more in love with him. And it's this constant back and forth and back and forth. An Englishman, his friend called Beaky, he dies abroad in Paris, and an Englishman was with him just before he died, and she's convinced it was Johnny. And towards the end, it starts to feel very much more like a Hitchcock film. The tone becomes very unsettling as Lena becomes literally unnerved by her husband. And he's been asking a detective writer friend of theirs about poisons and things. She's saying, oh my God, he's going to poison me. And he's been asking about her life insurance and things. So she's convinced. So the other thing this leads very nicely into, it all leads into each other, is appearances. They are often deceiving. So Cary Grant's character appears to be a well-off gentleman, which is definitely not the case. He acts like a rich, first-class citizen, but really he's not got a penny to his name. He's a playboy, a type, not with women, but just with his money and the high life kind of thing. He appears unbelievably charming, and he shows some of his real side, when he tells Lena to stay out of his affairs. It appears that he killed Beaky. It appears he asked about poisons to kill her.
Yeah.
It appears that he's going to push her out of the car at the end of the film. And then I would say my last thing that I think really is the heart of it is infatuation. So Lena is so smitten with her husband, despite all he does. She cannot leave him. I mean, he sat there going, oh my God, just leave him.
Yeah.
He's doing those awful things. Just leave him. And she just can't. When he sells the chairs, she's so upset and she feels doubts and pain from the act. Then when she's told by multiple people that he's been seen at the races when he said he wasn't going to be, it all hurts.
Yeah.
She even writes a note to say that she's leaving him, and then she immediately tears it up.
Yeah. Even though sometimes the lies don't seem to be, I haven't seen this, sorry. I assume the lies aren't necessarily designed to hurt her or anything like that, but it's a trust thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's to hide the truth so he can carry on doing what he is, because it's an addictive thing. He's got this addictive personality and he can't help himself. And it's not all for bad. I mean, one time he seems to have won this £2,000, which is actually the money he embezzled, and he spends it all on her and the house. He buys her a dog and he buys her the lovely new hat. So it's all for other people.
Yeah.
But it's a compulsive thing. He can't help himself.
It makes him more popular.
It's doing bad things to do those nice things. Do you know what I mean? So it's very much a tug back and forth and back and forth. It really does kind of pull her apart. And this is the film that she won her Oscar for.
Yeah, yeah.
The only acting award anybody won for a Hitchcock film. So I'll just end with, it's a good film, but there's nothing Hitchcock about it, really.
I mean, that sells me completely. I love that concept. Is he trying to? Is he not trying to?
Yeah.
To actually sit and be in that mindset.
It does end very openly because of the fact that he had to change it.
See, I like that though. And you think, is it going to carry on, or was she right all along? I love open endings personally. In any kind of film. I don't know why. I think it's more clever than doing a resolution.
Yeah, so that's Suspicion. So you'll have to see it and tell me what you think.
Yeah, I'll get around to that very soon. I really want to watch that. Okay, right. Notorious, 1946. I hadn't seen this one either.
For some reason, I always used to get Suspicion and Notorious mixed up. I'm not sure why.
No, I'm not sure now. Now you've described that. Yeah. Anyway, it's also set in 1946, which I think is important. It's post-World War II, and in the story, and probably in real life as well, the American government are trying to hunt down Nazis and basically bring them to justice. So what they do in one instance is they pressure the daughter of a convicted Nazi war criminal. Her name's Alicia Huberman, and she's played by Ingrid Bergman. Basically, to go undercover as a double agent in Brazil to spy on a Nazi organization that her father was involved with, seduce the leader to get information. But it's all a bit because she's started a love affair with her contact in the US government, Devlin, played by Cary Grant, and he's not particularly very happy about the direction things go and how far into the web of espionage, I suppose, that she goes in. You know, I know what I mean. So I will say actually that I need to probably rewatch this again. I don't think I got it so much the first time round. So an observational point here: it's a very unlikely protagonist for this film. Not so much because it's Ingrid Bergman. That's obviously not the case. But in terms of her character, it's not a conventional Hitchcock girl at all.
Yeah.
The first impressions that you have of her are basically what everyone else thinks about her, because initially she's there at her father's trial. She's followed by the press, she's followed by the police, and they all see her as daughter of Nazi, basically. And as the scenes go on, especially the first early scenes, you see her drinking heavily. She's drink driving. She's very aggressive, moody, often hungover. She says men make her sick. The police make her sick. She's quite a self-destructive woman, and everyone else just sees her as a woman of that sort. Miss Huberman is first, last, and always not a lady, is what they say. However, what we do learn as the film goes on is that she's actually a very patriotic person, despite having come over to America, and her relationship with her father was not as we had expected and what we were led to believe. In fact, she's quite relieved when she hears that he commits suicide in prison for whatever. More of an observation that I think that's different. I don't think we usually get that, especially not with leading female characters in his films.
Yeah.
And in that respect, then, the whole plot really and her mission as an undercover agent, which she's not, by the way. She's
just a normal woman, yeah.
Exactly. It's obviously very reluctant. Does she really have a choice in all of this, or is she just being made to do it? And you sort of said this to me as well, the interesting motivations in the film, if any. But the more you stay with her, the more you realise that if she does comply, I mean, she's not forced as such, she is given the choice. But if she does do it, she clears this notorious reputation, and she sort of earns her freedom from all that negative press about her and her family. The limits and the distance that she'll go to achieve that are quite significant, really, even to the point of getting married to the leader of this organisation. But the thing is, there's a whole other conflict going on, because this other guy, Devlin, who she's having this sort of affair with at the same time, is a bit conflicted in himself, because he's the one who's been asked to send her on this mission, but he almost hoped she said no.
If I remember rightly, I wasn't sure how to take him, because it wasn't sure whether he was good or bad, because he seemed like a bit of a sketchy character. Am I right in thinking that? I can't quite remember.
That's what I got, really. Not so much sketchy, but it was a bit like, it was like he was testing her. He almost expected her to turn the whole thing down. And she does a bloody good job, I'll tell you that. Like I said, the lengths that she goes to do this for him and for government. But he's very petty about it. He's very bitter and jealous when she's basically doing what she's been asked.
So he's asking her to do it and then going, well, I don't like the fact that you did it.
And he starts referring to her as Mrs. Sebastian, because she's married this guy, Alex Sebastian.
Yeah.
The captain, the US Secret Service man, Captain Prescott. Again, you can tell I didn't really quite grasp what was fully going on in the background here. She's referred to as a piece in their little theatrical game. And it's a bit like, well, Devlin's kind of complicit in that as well. So yeah, a bit unusual. It's a little section I call Mission Reluctant, because again, it's not necessarily your usual character doing usual things. So interesting. And again, a more throwaway point, really. Cinematography in general, not just close-ups, not just point of view stuff, but I will give a couple of examples. So there's one bit where she's introduced to all of the members of this organisation, all the friends of the leader. She's been told basically you have to go in and memorise as many names as you can, people's appearances and people's nationalities, where are they from, but don't overtly ask the questions. So we see it from her perspective, literally in one long take as they all come and shake and kiss her hand, and you find yourself playing along in a way, because like one of them goes delighted and you think, nah, not Nancy. And then you get another one, how do you do, and you go, no, not Nancy. One of them goes very honoured and you think, yeah, that one. So that it's quite fun, I suppose. Lots of long takes. There's a very famous one, and it's just one long close-up, and the two of them, Devlin and Alicia, they're just held very closely, even though they're moving across the room from the balcony all the way over to the phone. They have a phone conversation. They're still in this tight close-up, and all the way until they leave the door. It's a very long sequence. It's just interesting. I don't know what the point of it was, but it was very interesting to look at. And, of course, the close-ups. We mentioned the journey of the key in Dial M for Murder. Happens again here. She's stealing a key to the cellar in his house. And it goes from just seeing the key on the bunch, on the key ring, to going into her hand, to being exchange hands. Sometimes we're tricked. We think it's in one hand and it's not. And then she drops it, and then there's a big zoom where it finds her hand again.
There's a tension to it in this.
Yeah.
Thinking she's going to get caught at any moment.
Yeah. For such a small object, the stakes are really high.
Yeah.
That's really cool as well. Loads of little things like later on you get close-ups of drinks and cups because there's an implication that she's been poisoned maybe, or is she or isn't she? So just in general, no specific type of cinematography, but the whole thing you could tell was designed to provoke these emotional reactions really, which is what he was very good at doing anyway. So yeah, I want to watch it again. Once it got going and it was like she was infiltrating the house, I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see it again.
I think it will benefit from repeat viewings. I don't know why. I think it's more the introduction. I don't think the exposition of it is necessarily the best, and she's not the most likable character. None of them are really, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
But it's just a little harder to get into it.
Okay. My last film for the week was Strangers on a Train.
Yeah.
Which, do you know, I thoroughly enjoyed it. In fact, I might have even enjoyed it more than Rear Window. That's one of my top Hitchcock films.
It's exciting though, isn't it?
It's so well done, and it's just the acting's brilliant. It was really well cast, and it's a bit of a different look because it wasn't James Stewart and it wasn't Cary Grant.
True, good point.
It was a different look with different people. Yeah, it worked just as well as having those big stars in it. I really enjoyed it. So this one came out in 1951. And it's such an absurd plot, but so clever when you actually think about it.
Yeah.
So two men meet on a train. You've got Farley Granger, who plays the good guy.
Yeah. Guy
Haynes. He's an amateur tennis player, and he's in a marriage that he's just realised he's being played basically as a woman's a tart. Let's just face it. She's awful. So he wants a divorce, basically. He's in love with another woman, a very fancy woman who's the daughter of a senator in Washington. And then you've got Bruno Anthony, played by Robert Walker, who is brilliant in this.
Psycho.
I know, exactly. They meet on a train, and you can tell there's something not right about Bruno, that he's just weird. And he starts talking about his relationship with his father, and it's a bad relationship, and how he just wants to kill him. So he tells this theory to Guy that if two strangers met and did each other's murder, there would be no motive, so they'd never get caught.
Yeah.
And that is the whole film, really. That's where it starts.
Yeah.
So Bruno Anthony is my first defining thing of this film, because he drives the plot with his idea. He's determined to kill his father, and he thinks, because he's a psychopath, that Guy has planned it with him, so he goes and kills his wife, who he wants a divorce from. He's quite obviously unhinged. He's insane. He's dangerous because of that. And you can tell that from the start. Immediately, you can tell there's something off.
It's in his eyes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something about
definitely
that.
In his eyes, yeah. He becomes like Guy's shadow as it carries on. He keeps seeing him, watching him. He calls him. He sends him letters. He sends him a gun. He's all sorts. Sends him the key to his house so he can go and kill his father. And Guy has no intention of doing this whatsoever.
No.
But he's stuck. He's stuck here because there's nothing he can do about it. Because Bruno says, well, why would I kill your wife? You're the one who wants a divorce. Why would I do it? And there's a great shot. He's playing tennis and he sees Bruno in the audience. And the
so
shot
good.
of the crowd, and they're watching the tennis, so they're turning their heads left to right, all except for Bruno, who's completely still and is staring straight at Guy. It's a fantastic shot. I loved it. It's just a brilliant shot. And Hitchcock's daughter was in this as well, Pat Hitchcock. I have to say, I just loved her. I thought this was brilliant. She is the younger daughter of the senator. She wears glasses, just like the wife of Guy did. And every time Bruno sees her, you hear the fairground music of where he killed her.
There's nothing creepier than that.
Yeah, exactly. So that leads nicely on to my next point, which is the fairground.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite key in this. So the fairground's the scene of the murder. It's loud, it's chaotic, it's busy. Easy place for something to happen, really, you would think. There's something about seeing a grown man alone at a fair that's really unnerving.
Oh, it's so creepy. Well, it's not somewhere you go on your own.
Yeah, because now I think we'd think he was a paedophile or something. So I don't know if that's maybe putting a 21st century opinion onto it. But there was something unnerving about it, especially as he was following her around.
The fact that he's just acting really suspicious anyway.
Following her everywhere. But she kind of seemed into that. She's like, oh, who's this guy who keeps watching me and looking at me? And I wonder if he's, So there was obviously she's just...
She kind of had it coming, to be fair.
Yeah. And there's another great shot where they go onto these boats. You see the shadows of her in the boat with these two men she's gone with, and you see the shadows on the wall, and then this almost predatory Bruno's shadow appearing up close behind them, and then there's this screaming. You think that something's happened, but it hasn't.
Yeah,
and it's just like this anti-climax. And the murder was brilliant as well. There's some real stylistic shots in this. The murder is seen in the reflection of her glasses, which are fallen on the floor. It's a really clever shot. This leads on to my next point, which is the lighter. So Guy Haynes had a lighter that said from A to G. It was just like this kind of love item that she'd bought for him, and it's left on the train. So Bruno has the lighter before anything happens at all. He drops it during the murder and you think he'll forget it, but he picks it up. And this means that when Guy refuses to kill Bruno's father, well, Bruno's going to plant that lighter at the scene of Miriam's murder to frame Guy. So that it becomes this really important item then. And Bruno gets hit on the shoulder while he's holding the lighter outside the fairground, and it falls down a drain. And that becomes this really tense kind of scene because it's going backwards and forwards from him trying to reach his hand through, the music straining. And then it goes back to Guy who's trying to finish his tennis match as quickly as possible to get to the fairground.
Yeah, real nail biter, that part.
Quite tense, really. Yeah, it's really good scene. And then the film climaxes in that fairground, and that's when it all starts to unravel. They jump onto this merry-go-round, and the guy who runs it gets shot, and it starts going super fast, which I don't think is possible. I'm not sure they were built that way.
I just didn't understand why it went so dramatic.
I just thought it was really entertaining. But not only was it entertaining, it had a very interesting plot and it was well acted. It had some really great shots in it as well. There was some really great ideas in there that I thought really worked. Definitely recommend that one. Even as a starting point with Hitchcock, it's very easy and entertaining, and I think it would be a good place to start. So that's Strangers on a Train.
No, I really, really enjoyed that. Okay. Oh, God. Right, okay, The Birds.
Last film,
I was just looking down and I was like, right, here we go. The Birds, 1963, arguably the last great film that he made.
Yes, I think so.
And if you don't know what it's about, it's in the title.
It's about birds.
So Tippi Hedren plays Melanie Daniels. She's sort of a wealthy newspaper heiress and a chic socialite. She quite amusingly meets a man called Mitch Brenner, played by Rod Taylor, in a pet shop where she's pretending to work, just as a prank, because you can. But it all falls a bit flat, and he gets the last laugh, and she can't stand that. So she decides to track him down to his family home over in Bodega Bay to personally deliver the birds that he was planning to buy for his little sister's birthday. But none of that's really important because birds start attacking everyone instead. So that's kind of the plot.
For the 1960s, this genuinely is a horror film.
Oh, yeah. The promotional material for the film isn't wrong. I do think this was probably the scariest film ever made up until this point. I guess my first point is talking about the birds themselves in terms of how it was done, really. First thing, the sound design. I was looking during the opening credits. I was thinking, is there even a score? Like, for this, is there even any music? And there isn't. No one's credited as the composer. Bernard Herrmann is there, but he's there as a sound consultant. And there's some more people who are hired for electronic sound production and composition. So really, you don't get any music. The only sense of music you get instead is this soundscape, this relentless screeching, squawking.
God, I never noticed that.
It's weird, isn't it? Because that becomes the music.
Yeah, I didn't notice that there was no music.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, well, it obviously worked then because you don't notice the lack of it.
Yeah. The way they've made the sounds, I don't know exactly how they did it, but to me it sounds almost sci-fi, like monsters, like gunshots or radios or cats fighting. And in some scenes it actually drowns out the dialogue entirely. You don't get to hear what's going on anymore. It's just, it dominates the scene that much. So then the other part is the special effects. And they went to so much effort in this because it's not just footage of birds or dummies of birds, but you've got puppets and animatronics, you've got back projection. Some really early, it wasn't green screen nor blue screen at the time, it was yellow screen.
Well, if he was going to do it, he was going to do it right, wasn't he?
Absolutely. And on top of that, actual real birds in the scenes as well.
Yeah.
Don't watch this film if you suffer from epilepsy or anything like that, because the flapping in front of the screen, it's really quite visceral, I suppose, in the way that it's done. And then the scenes where, they're coming out the chimney like Hogwarts letter style.
Oh, that was horrendous. I'd totally forgotten about that scene. They were all coming out, hundreds of them. I was like, oh my God.
They're smashing through glass. You can see beaks coming through doors. They attack Melanie at one point. It's not really a spoiler. You can tell that they're all going to get attacked.
Yeah.
She's pecked to within an inch of her life.
Yeah.
These were real birds that were thrown at her for 5 days of shooting.
That was one of the main things. That's one of her main stories, isn't it? When she talks about Hitchcock, is she nearly lost an eye.
Yeah, probably.
Not only were they thrown at her, they were tied to her. Can you imagine how horrendous that would be? It would be horrendous.
How traumatized she was, as if it was a punishment. He didn't tell her also that it was going to be done that way. She thought it was all going to be just animatronics.
Yeah.
And they didn't need to do that many takes necessarily.
Oh, no, not necessarily, no.
The other thing that I wanted to say, relating to the birds themselves, is this sort of sustained threat that's present pretty much from the opening credits. The birds are there.
Yeah.
But all the way through, at various points, you're teased or reminded periodically of this sense of impending doom, that something is coming. We don't always understand what this thing is that's coming, but you know it's coming, which I think is good. He does it in various ways, really. So literally, visually on the screen, you'll see circling birds. You'll see them closing in, or views from the skies as a random bird will fly past.
Yeah, you get bird point of view.
Absolutely. Yeah, bird's eye view. And then you see them lining the telephone wires, or you'll see them gradually gathering on the climbing frame at the school before the big attack.
That's what I was going to say. That is so unnerving.
It's because they're crows as well. And if you notice, the whole film, it's crows and seagulls, like the bitchiest of birds, really.
Big, bloody big birds.
They're horrible, yeah. The other thing about this is that it usually happens at the ends of the scene. So you'll have something to do with the drama and the comedy and the rom-com aspect.
Yeah.
And then it will leave you with a character looking up and seeing them. And it's a very ... moment, isn't it? Each chapter of the film introduces another element of the threat, and that these birds are amassing in number.
Yeah.
They are growing, and the threat grows with them.
Yeah.
But he also does it in the sound. There's moments where it's completely silent, so the exact opposite of the birds being there. And that just means, especially with no music as well,
Yeah.
that the first sound of it,
You're going to shit yourself.
yeah, basically. And I found myself getting quite itchy, like physically quite itchy in the film, because it's like you're waiting for it to happen.
Yeah.
Add to that, I mean, there's just more and more the references to birds.
Yeah.
Not just the lovebirds at the beginning in the pet shops, part of the story, but Mitch's mother's having a conversation on the phone about chickens that are not eating anymore. And it builds and builds this bigger picture of what might be going on. Loads to say about the birds. Sorry, that went on a bit. My other point I'd like to make is about Melanie Daniels herself, the character.
Very odd character.
The voice and the outfits. I thought, God, who does it remind me of? And for a while I was like, why do I think it's Natalie Portman? And it's not. It's Jackie Kennedy. It's Jackie Kennedy.
Ah, very stylish.
Yeah, a very head-turning character, I've noticed. Everyone in every scene is some way looking at her.
I think she's quite cold to start with. But I think that's probably intentional.
Yeah. Well, one thing about her, really, I suppose, is that she does come across quite boiled. I think not necessarily in a bad way. She's very polite, but she gets
everything she wants.
Everything she wants. She gets favors, bird deliveries, cigarettes, boats hired, free telephone calls. Either because people really do just want to please her, or she'll flirt for it.
Yeah.
You're not quite sure whether she is aware that she's doing this or whether she's quite oblivious to her charms.
I think she's very aware of it.
Yeah. The fact that she's quite deceitful, isn't she? She lies a lot, especially to Mitch, even if it's flirtatiously. And to Annie, again, she lies about, there's no rooms available in the town. Or the first time she arrives, she knocks on a door. When asked, who is it? She goes, it's me. Very much, she's never met this person before. But if it means that she gets in and gets the information she wants, she'll do it. The whole thing is oriented around her wanting to get her way. She's completely uninhibited and sort of fearless. Not for long, because not like most Hitchcock films, The Birds is in two halves. It's a rom-com that turns into a horror, and things very quickly start turning unpleasant for her.
Yeah.
Is this what you get for being a man stalking, prank pulling, bird buying, boat hiring, house breaking little prankster? Well, that's one way you could read the film. I was happy I wrote that down because I couldn't remember that at the top of my head. And that's my last point, really. And we touched on open endings earlier. This is one way you could read the film. There are so many. I don't think there's a film that can be read in so many different ways as The Birds. I don't think I can think of one. There's no the end title screen. That was removed, I believe.
Yeah, it just ends, yeah.
So what ways can we look at it? That it's a disease or a pandemic? Or that the birds are getting revenge, as if to say, now look who's caged up. There's a trailer for The Birds, and it's Hitchcock just speaking to the camera for 5 minutes or so. It's very tongue-in-cheek, but he's talking about the great relationship we have with birds. The fact that they let us hunt them and imprison them and take their eggs and stuff them and wear them and use their feathers for pens and stuff. It's a sarcastic way of saying, why would they ever do something like this? Or the Judgment Day apocalypse kind of route. Is humanity being punished? Is it the end of the world? It's like the biblical plagues, isn't it?
David Attenborough could probably use this film to his advantage.
Here we have the sequel. Or is what the birds are doing a metaphor for the drama that's happening with the women in Mitch's life? The ex-girlfriend and the mother are very jealous, They turn against any woman who flocks and vies for Mitch's attention. And there's a bit of a Freudian Oedipus thing going on as well, If she's a threat to the family unit, the mother doesn't like her.
Yeah.
And mother nature, in a way, one fights back when the other one comes in. Or in general, is it just that Melanie is the city outsider? She doesn't fit in Bodega Bay and she's rattling the cage a bit too much.
Well, you do have the hysterical mother who says it's all her doing.
She's
new. Who are you? You're a stranger. You brought it with you.
I think you're evil. Evil! It's what she screams at her.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It just makes you think, is it just that the more Melanie stays in Bodega Bay, the more nature will try and fight back? So, yeah. So there's loads of different ways you can read the film, and I love that aspect about it because they're all plausible within the story. You think, all of these could be exactly what happens.
I remember my mum making us watch this for the first time. It was years ago.
Age 3.
But no, not quite that long ago. I was at least 15.
Okay, that's
so
all right.
At least. We sat down and watched it first time, and then I had to go and walk the dog straight after. And I remember going out and a bird flew over and I literally hunched. I was like,
yeah,
because it really is quite creepy.
Every time I hear a bird squawk now, and I'd never really heard them squawk before. They must have been doing it all along. I just hadn't noticed.
But you notice now.
So yeah, it's fascinating.
And that's it. That's
Pretty
part
much.
2.
It
6
is.
movies, lots of themes.
But did you spot the Hitchcock?
I did spot the Hitchcock. I did all 3 this week.
Damn.
Because they were quite obvious. Well, Suspicion was a little bit harder, but the other 2 were very, very easy.
Let's run through.
So Rear Window for me, it was in the songwriter's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like making drinks or something in there. He was in there with him.
Very obvious one.
Very obvious, yeah.
The 39 Steps. I'm maybe talking myself out of half a point here, but I kind of think I deserve half a point.
Okay.
I say sort of. I noticed a man walking in the street at the beginning outside the music hall, and he throws litter on the floor. It's very obvious. It's drawn attention to, but I wouldn't have known it was Hitchcock, to be honest, from the look of it. Can I have half a point that I noticed him? I just didn't notice it was him.
Okay, so you're going to take half a point for that one, are you?
When you see it, you'll be like, well, he's not dressed as Hitchcock. He's got a hat on. You can't see his face. It could just have been an extra.
Yeah. My next one is like that. Suspicion was quite like that.
Well, can I have a full point then? Half a point then.
Well, mine's quite similar, but I was sure it was him. He's got his back to the camera, and it is quite a long shot as well, so he's not like right there in front of you. And he's putting a letter in a post box, and he's got a hat on as well.
Okay, Notorious.
Was this better?
Yeah, a little bit better. He stood in the party of the newlyweds, and he's just basically downing a glass of champagne whilst not even leaving the table of champagne, and then he just walks off. Quite obvious.
Okay.
And it looked like him, which helped.
Yeah. Strangers on a Train. I really liked. It's probably my favourite cameo so far. Is he's trying to get onto the train with a massive double bass case.
That's right. Yeah.
I really like that one.
These are all obvious. I don't know. I'll just take half a point. And then what we on the birds?
Yes.
Very really obvious. Really
one.
obvious. Yeah. Comes out the pet shop at the beginning with the 2 little dogs. Don't know what type they are, but they're very obvious white dogs. But, yeah, very obvious.
Very good. So what does that put us on then? We were on 2.
We were on 2 each last episode, and
right. So that's 5 for me.
I'll have 4.5 then.
Okay. Hey, you beat me on almost every single quiz,
but
it's only fair. I'm in the lead for
fail
once.
on that one though. It doesn't even look like him. Anyway. Well, what's coming up in the next episode? The conclusion of the 3-part Hitchcock series.
I'm really, really excited about some of these.
Well, again, it's another great bunch. We've got Psycho, North by Northwest, Rope, Shadow of a Doubt, The Lady Vanishes, and Lifeboat. So
there are some absolute classics in there.
Absolute corkers. We could say it every time. It's unbelievable.
Yep. I'm really excited about Psycho, even though I didn't get to do that one.
It's not yours. No, it's all mine. Mine.
I'm very excited about that.
You got Rear Window.
Yes, I did.
But yeah, in the meantime,
where can you find us, Matt?
Well, you can find us on our website, cinechat.co.uk/podcast, or on any social media, especially Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube, where you can listen also on Amazon. You can listen on Spotify and iTunes. Just search Cinechat Podcast. Or you can email us at
podcast@cinechat.co.uk.
Fantastic.
And that's it. So it's bye from me.
Bye from me. Look out for those birds. Stay away from showers. You'll find out why.